He told her the flight was canceled due to a storm in Calgary. He said it with the kind of steady, apologetic voice that had always made Serena feel like the most understood woman in any room. The voice that said, "I wish I could be there. But what can you do about weather?" He said it while standing at Gate C-14 of Toronto Pearson International Airport, his hand resting at the small of another woman's back, his carry-on already tagged and checked. Serena Okafor-Webb was watching from the mezzanine level above departures. She had come to pick him up from what was supposed to be his return flight from a medical conference in Vancouver. She had taken the afternoon off work. She had stopped at the Italian bakery on Bloor for the almond biscotti he loved. She was standing at the glass railing with a paper bag in one hand and her phone buzzing in the other. And she was looking down at her husband of 11 years, buying a bottle of water at the newsstand with a woman whose luggage matched his. She did not move. She watched him hand the woman the water. She watched him laugh at something. She watched him adjust the collar of the gray wool coat she had picked out for him at the Bay 2 Christmases ago. His mother was 3 steps behind him, pulling a wheeled carry-on in burgundy. His brother was beside her, scrolling his phone, carrying a duty-free bag. The whole Crawford family was going somewhere. Not one of them had mentioned it to Serena. Not one of them had thought to mention it, because to the Crawford family, Serena's knowing or not knowing had never been something that required their attention. She stood at that glass railing for 4 minutes. She did not cry. She did not shake. She simply calculated. Serena Okafor-Webb had been calculating since she was 7 years old, sitting in the back seat of her father's Buick, while he explained compound interest to her, using hockey cards as an example. Her father, Gordon Okafor, had built a construction and development company in Hamilton, over 30 years from 3 employees and a single contract with the city, to a firm that had its name on 2 office towers in downtown Toronto and a community sports center in Mississauga. Her mother, Anne, had managed the books, the contracts, the labor disputes, and the family with equal precision and no need for applause. Serena had grown up understanding that competence was a tool, and like any tool, it was wisest not to show your sharpest edge until you needed it. She had not planned to keep the inheritance quiet. It had simply become a habit that calcified into a decision. Her first serious relationship, in her early 20s, had shifted the moment her boyfriend learned who her father was. The quality of his attention changed. He began deferring to her in ways that had nothing to do with respect and everything to do with proximity to money. She ended it. Her next relationship, a longer one, ended when she discovered the man had been mentioning her family name in conversations with his own family, in ways that made her feel like a financial strategy rather than a person. After that, she made a quiet rule. She would live on what she earned. She would present herself as what she was, a project coordinator at an urban planning firm in Waterloo, methodical and careful with her budget, someone who brown-bagged lunch and bought furniture from estate sales and drove a sensible Civic. She would find out through the slow accumulation of ordinary days whether someone could love the woman without factoring in the family. She met Dominic Crawford at a mutual friend's cottage on Lake Huron when she was 31. He was charming in the way of men who have been told since childhood that their charm is a gift to the world. He was a structural engineer with a good salary and a confident laugh, and a way of listening that felt genuine, at least at first. He asked about her work with real curiosity. He asked about her family with polite interest, and did not seem particularly impressed or disappointed by what she told him, which was a partial truth. Her family was from Hamilton. Her father worked in construction. Her mother kept the books, all accurate. None of it the full picture. She assessed him over 18 months. She watched how he handled a disagreement with a contractor over a renovation at his condo. She watched how he talked about his ex-girlfriend in ways that were a little too comfortable with her failures. She watched how he greeted servers, how he spoke to his mother on the phone, how he behaved at 4 in the morning when he was tired. And she was tired, and neither of them had anything to perform. He was not a bad man. He was a man who believed the world was, on balance, arranged in his favor, and had never been given strong evidence to the contrary. She married him anyway. She had chosen to believe that what was genuine in him was strong enough. She was wrong, but she did not know that yet. They moved to Kitchener. Serena continued working, continued managing the household, continued maintaining the invisible architecture of 2 people's lives. With the efficiency of someone who had watched her mother do it without complaint and had privately promised to demand more credit than her mother ever received. She never quite got around to that demand. Dominic thanked her when she thought to mention it was necessary. He praised her when his colleagues complimented the dinner she had organized for his team. He said she was incredible in the vague, habitual way people say the sky is beautiful. Accurately, but without really looking at it. She managed the mortgage, the utility accounts, the insurance, the car maintenance schedules, the grocery budget, the holiday cards that went out to both families with both their names on them. She tracked his professional development hours because he always forgot in November and panicked. She remembered the names of his colleagues' partners and sent a casserole dish when his senior manager's wife had a difficult pregnancy. She did everything, and Dominic lived inside the result, the way you live inside a warm house without thinking about the furnace. The Crawford family was another matter. Dominic's mother, Beverly, was an expert in the particular art of managing expectations by managing the people who held them. She never said anything cruel enough to repeat. She simply created a climate, a coolness around Serena's suggestions, a brightness that appeared when Serena was not in the room and dimmed when she entered. 11 years of small exclusions, each one individually defensible. A family text group Serena had not been added to. Oh, you know how these things are. We just use it for the cousins, really. A Christmas Eve plan that crystallized while Serena was bathing her children and was presented at dinner as settled. A birthday party for Beverly at Dominic's brother's place in Oakville that Serena heard about from a mutual friend at the grocery store 2 days before. Dominic's brother, Craig, maintained a brotherly solidarity with Beverly that expressed itself as friendly obliviousness to Serena's. His wife, Paula, was pleasant to Serena's face and efficient with her eyes whenever Serena left the room. The Crawfords were not unkind. They were simply a closed system, and Serena had never been given the access code, regardless of what her last name now said on paper. She raised it once. She was specific. She had a list of incidents. She always had a list. And she presented them calmly after dinner on a Tuesday when the children were asleep. Dominic listened with the expression of a man who already knew his answer and was waiting for a polite interval to deliver it. They don't mean it that way, Serena. You take things too personally. You know how family is. She did not raise it again. She filed it. She had been filing things since year 3. Serena Okafor Webb had never once dipped into the Okafor family trust. Her personal share, held in a structure managed by her family's legal team out of a firm in Hamilton she had known since childhood, generated more annually than Dominic's take-home salary. Her father's company had continued to grow after he handed her the directorship she quietly held as a non-executive board member. She reviewed quarterly reports on her laptop after the children were in bed. The trust grew. The marriage continued. The test, which she had never formally ended, continued alongside it. She stood at the glass railing at Pearson, and she made her phone call. Not to Dominic. She had already decided she was not going to call Dominic. She had learned what she needed to know from 4 minutes of observation, and she was not interested in the performance of a conversation that would produce lies she would have to manage. She called a woman named Patricia Osei-Mensah, who was not in the name file she had ever shown anyone, who worked for a firm in Burlington that specialized in matrimonial law, high net worth, and who had been her mother's friend since before Serena was born. She called and she said, simply, Patricia, it's Serena. I need you to start the file. Yes, Monday is fine. Then she walked back through the terminal, past the departures board, past the Tim Hortons, where she and Dominic had once stood in line together after a flight from Halifax, laughing about the delayed luggage, out through the sliding doors and into the gray October afternoon. She drove home in 40 minutes without music. She sat in the driveway for 3 minutes. Then she went inside and made dinner for her children. Dominic returned 5 days later in the gray coat, holding a duty-free bag that contained a bottle of rye whiskey and a bar of Swiss chocolate, which he offered as a gesture of return so unremarkable she almost admired the confidence of it. He was tanned. He was relaxed. He had the particular ease of a man who believed his story was intact. How was the conference? Good. Busy. Long week. Calgary the second time around is always rough. It wasn't Calgary. The duty-free bag stopped moving. What? The storm. The cancellation. You said the flight from Calgary was canceled. Your conference was in Vancouver. A pause. One pause, exactly 1 beat too long, and she saw it. She saw the machinery of it. The split second of recalibration behind his eyes. Right, yes, I meant. There was a connecting issue through Calgary. Serena set down the wooden spoon. She opened the kitchen drawer. She removed a folder. Inside the folder was a printed screenshot of his gate assignment, obtained through a contact she had made years ago when auditing a logistics vendor for her firm, a contact who had since moved into airport operations and owed her a professional favor. Gate C14. Toronto Pearson departures. Outbound. Not arrivals. The flight time was stamped. His name was on the manifest summary. She'd been given access to through channels that a woman whose family had built half the commercial real estate in 2 Ontario cities had access to, if she chose to use them. She turned the page. She placed a second document beside the first. A hotel booking confirmation from a property in Nassau. 2 guests, 5 nights. The second name listed as Courtney Belanger. This has been going on for at least 14 months, she said. I know because the financial trail is clear. You are not careful, Dominic. You used the joint account twice, once for a dinner in October and once for a spa booking in March. Both times you said you were at work functions. I cross-referenced the dates. She placed a third document, an itemized credit card statement with 2 entries highlighted. Dinner for 2 at a restaurant in the Distillery District she had never visited with him. A spa and hotel package in Niagara-on-the-Lake during a weekend he had told her was a site inspection in Brantford. 14 months is not a mistake, Dominic. 14 months is a second life. He began the sentence she had already written in her head 3 times. Serena, please. I'm going to stop you there. Her voice did not rise. It had the quality of a woman who had learned her mother's precision and added her own finish. I didn't call you when I saw you at the gate. You want to know why? Because I had already decided. Everything I needed was already in motion. I made 1 phone call from the parking level. Everything else happened while you were in Nassau. The kitchen was quiet. The children were asleep upstairs. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the yard, and a car went by slowly in the wet dark. Dominic set the duty-free bag on the counter. You saw me. I was there to pick you up. I had taken the afternoon off. I had driven to the airport. I was standing at the mezzanine railing with a bag of biscotti from Tironi when you were at gate C14 with Courtney Belanger and your mother pulling her carry-on 3 steps behind you. The color moved out of his face in a way she had not seen before. She watched it go with the clinical attention of someone who no longer had anything to protect. My mother knew. Yes, I've thought about that too. She closed the folder. She did not raise her voice for any of the following. She simply told him. The divorce papers would be filed by her legal team out of Burlington on Monday morning. He was welcome to use the guest room until the formal process began. The children's school had not been notified and would not be notified by either of them until they had agreed on language together, which would happen through their respective counsel. The mortgage was in her name. The household accounts were in her name. The car insurance was in her name. She had set up a separate bank account for him, into which she had transferred 6 months of what he might reasonably require for personal expenses. As a courtesy, and because she had 2 children who needed their father to be functional during the transition period, Dominic looked at her across the kitchen island, and she could see him trying to locate the version of her he had married. Serena, we have children. We have a life here. We can get through this. We can get help. We have children. She picked up the folder. That's the only reason this is happening in our kitchen, instead of in a letter from Patricia Osi-Mensa's office at 9 o'clock Monday morning. The children are the only courtesy I owe you at this point. She walked toward the stairs. His voice followed her. Please, I'll end it. I'll call her tonight. Serena, please. She paused at the foot of the stairs. She did not turn around. You should know something before you start trying to rebuild your position. Her hand rested on the newel post, the one she had refinished herself the summer they moved in, because she had read how online, and done it in 3 evenings while Dominic was away for a fishing weekend. I am not who you think I am. I have never been who you think I am. She went upstairs. She sat on the edge of the bed. She breathed for 30 seconds with her eyes closed. Then she opened her laptop and sent 2 emails, one to Patricia, one to her brother Malcolm, who sat on the Okafor board, and would need to know that the discretionary provisions in her trust agreement were about to become relevant. The game had begun. Dominic Crawford did not yet know what pieces were on the board. In the weeks that followed, the Okafor name surfaced. It surfaced first when Serena stepped back into the role she had been understating for 11 years. The Okafor Group had a philanthropic arm, the Okafor Community Foundation, which funded affordable housing initiatives, youth trades apprenticeship programs, and a women's transitional housing network across southern Ontario. Serena had been a silent board observer for years. She became a full voting member in November, and her first act was to authorize a significant capital pledge to a shelter network in Hamilton that brought her name into the local media cycle for the first time since her wedding announcement. The coverage was modest and respectable, the kind a woman who has been absent from a scene for a decade receives when she returns. A brief profile in a regional business publication, a quote in the Hamilton Spectator, a mention in a non-profit sector newsletter. Enough for people who knew the Okafor name to begin placing her. Dominic's colleagues began placing her. One of his partners at the engineering firm, a man named Graham, who had met Serena at exactly 2 firm functions and had never thought to ask her last name with any particular attention, sent Dominic a text message after the newsletter mention. "Is your wife related to the Okafor Group people? The development company?" Dominic had never asked. He had been married to her for 11 years and had never thought to wonder why a woman, who described her family as comfortable, never worried about money, never flinched at a bill, never seemed stressed about the mortgage in the particular way other couples he knew were stressed about their mortgages. He had attributed it to her being good with budgeting. He had appreciated the result and never examined the mechanism. Now the mechanism was visible, and it had a name on a building. The Okafor Community Foundation had co-funded a women's transitional housing complex in Kitchener the previous year. The building had a donor recognition wall in the lobby. Serena had never mentioned it. She had reviewed the gift documents late at night and filed them with the other quarterly reports and gone to sleep. The wall, in the lobby of a building 4 kilometers from the house where they slept, read, "Major Donor, Okafor Family Foundation, in memory of Gordon Okafor." Her father's name, in a building in her city, funded by money Dominic had never known existed. The second thing that surfaced was the development parcel. Dominic's firm had been pursuing a mixed-use infill project in downtown Kitchener for nearly 2 years. The anchor requirement was a vacant commercial parcel on a corner lot that a holding company had listed and then quietly removed from the market 18 months prior. His firm had been making inquiries. The holding company was unresponsive. The deal was stalled. His partners were restless. The project was beginning to lose its financing window. The holding company was a numbered corporation registered in Ontario. Its beneficial owner, through a layered trust structure Dominic had never had occasion to examine, was Serena Ann Okafor Webb. The parcel had been in the Okafor portfolio since her father acquired it during the post-2008 purchasing period. She had let it sit. She reviewed it in her quarterly reports like a line item in a balanced account. Valued. Held. Not urgent. It was now urgent to Dominic's partners. It was an obstacle his firm could not move. He did not know why the holding company would not respond. He did not know the holding company belonged to his wife. He spent 40 hours over 2 months trying to locate a human contact inside the corporate structure and found nothing he could get traction on. Patricia's team knew about the parcel. They had flagged it in the first week as a negotiating element. Serena had listened and then asked them to hold it where it was. She did not want to use it as leverage. She wanted it to simply exist as it was. A piece of her family's history that Dominic had spent 2 years unable to move without understanding why, and would eventually understand all at once. The household collapsed with a reliability that would have been sad if she had not seen it coming so clearly. Dominic did not know which company held the water heater maintenance contract. He did not know the login for the hydro account. He did not know the name of their family doctor, which he discovered when he needed a prescription filled, and realized he had been going to an appointment every 3 years and had never retained the clinic's name. He did not know the children's school board login, which was required for the transfer forms, when he attempted to arrange a temporary custody arrangement during the filing period. He called Serena 4 times in the first 3 weeks about logistics. She answered each question with the directness of an instruction manual and without warmth, because warmth was not what he had earned, and it was not what she had left to offer. Beverly Crawford arrived at Dominic's assistance in week 3. She stayed for 10 days. In those 10 days, Beverly discovered, systematically and with increasing quiet, the full architecture of what Serena had built and maintained for 11 years. The emergency binder in the utility drawer, the seasonal maintenance calendar pinned inside the pantry door, the insurance binder, the school forms folder, the list of every contractor, plumber, electrician, and technician who had ever come to the house, each entry with a date, a description of the work, and a rating out of 5 for reliability and pricing. Beverly called Craig on the 8th day. "She ran everything, Craig. I mean everything. I didn't know. I truly did not know." "Well, she always seemed a bit much, didn't she? The organizing and the no." Beverly's voice, Craig told Paula later, had a quality he had never heard from her before. A flatness. The sound of a woman arriving at a conclusion about herself, that she would not be sharing with anyone who had not already earned it. She was doing what needed to be done. And we called it controlling. We ate at her table, and we never once said thank you. It was an honest thing. As honest as Beverly had ever been about Serena. It arrived 11 years too late, and it reached no one who could use it. Courtney Belanger lasted 3 months. She had met Dominic Crawford at a professional event in Toronto, where he had presented as a successful engineer with a beautiful house in Kitchener, a well-organized life, and a marriage that was, as he had told her, complicated but essentially over. The house had been part of the picture. The ordered household had been part of the picture. The man who had a family doctor's number in his phone and always knew where his passport was had been part of the picture. The passport was in a filing cabinet Serena had taken with her when she moved out. The household was, within 6 weeks of Serena's departure, a different place entirely. Recycling not sorted. Internet bill late. Furnace filter unchanged. The air in the house, acquiring the particular staleness of a space no one is caring for. Courtney had not anticipated any of this. She had anticipated a man. What she encountered was the scaffold that had been holding one up. Without the scaffold, the man was a structure looking for something to lean on. She left on a Tuesday with a weekend bag and a practiced expression of finality that told Dominic everything he needed to know about whether she had surprised herself. She had not. She had simply stayed 3 months past the moment of recognition. Dominic sat in the kitchen that evening, with a glass of rye from the duty-free bottle and the heating bill on the counter, and the dim, unwanted knowledge that the woman he had dismissed as a little uptight, honestly, she just needs to let go sometimes, was the precise and invisible reason any part of his life had ever felt manageable. Serena bought a townhouse in uptown Waterloo in December. Not a rental. A purchase, outright through the trust. A clean 4-bedroom with a finished basement, a south-facing yard, and a screened porch she had specifically wanted because she had spent 11 years looking at the open concept layout of a house, chosen primarily for its proximity to Dominic's office, and had never once had a screened porch. Her daughter, Amani, claimed the bedroom with the built-in shelves. Her son, Theo, claimed the basement, which he declared was primarily for his Lego collection, and not to be confused with anyone else's space. She returned to the Okafor Foundation in a formal capacity in January. The operational skills she had spent 11 years applying to the management of a household. The scheduling, the vendor relationships, the budget tracking, the instinct for when a system needed maintenance before it broke, transferred to a 7-figure charitable operation with a disorienting and satisfying directness. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. She had simply been doing it for an audience of one who never quite looked up. The regional profile appeared in March. A business publication in Hamilton ran a 2-page feature on women returning to leadership roles in the family philanthropy sector. The photograph showed Serena standing in front of the donor wall of the Kitchener housing complex, wearing a rust-colored coat, her posture easy, her expression carrying the particular stillness of someone who has stopped imagining how she appears and has simply begun appearing. The article mentioned her divorce in a single clause in the 3rd paragraph and spent the rest of its space on the Okafor Foundation's capital commitments and Serena's plans for the apprenticeship network. Dominic read it on his phone. Craig had sent it with a short message. Didn't know your ex-wife was one of those Okafors. Dominic had not known either. He had not known because he had never asked what kind of Okafors her family were. He had met her father twice. Gordon Okafor had been warm and straightforward, and had asked Dominic one question at dinner that Dominic had always remembered. "What are you curious about?" Dominic had answered with something about structural design trends, and Gordon had nodded and said, "Good in the way you say good." When you already know, the curious was the word that mattered, not the answer. He had not been curious about his wife. He had been comfortable with her. He had appreciated her. He had, in the vocabulary of a man who takes his own presence for granted, loved her. But he had never been curious about her. Not in the sustained, searching way that Gordon Okafor had been asking about when he asked that question over a lamb chop in Hamilton 11 years ago. The call came in April. Serena was at the screened porch with a mug of Earl Grey, a case file spread on the table in front of her, the maple tree in the backyard beginning to bud. Her phone lit up with Dominic's name. She let it ring. Then she answered, "Serena." The performance was gone. What remained was the voice of a man who had run out of material. "I need to talk to you." Not through the lawyers. Please, speak. I know about the trust. I know about your family. I know about the foundation. I know who your father was. You know now." She set down her mug. "You didn't know for 11 years. Not because I hid it well, Dominic. Because you never asked. You never asked about my family, beyond what I volunteered. You never asked how a woman on a project coordinator's salary managed everything we had without visible strain. You never thought to wonder. You were not curious. A silence. Outside, a cardinal landed on the fence post and then left. It wasn't fair of you to keep it from me. I had a right to know. You had 11 years to ask. You used them to let your mother exclude me from family decisions, to let the life I built for our family run itself in your mind without anyone running it, and to take a woman to Nassau while I drove to the airport with a bag of biscotti. You do not get to reframe my self-protection as a debt I owe you. My mother wants to. Your mother wants to renegotiate now that she has seen the balance sheet. That is not the same thing as wanting to apologize. I have no interest in renegotiation." The terms she was offered for 11 years were straightforward and she declined them. A pause. "Serena, the Kitchener project is dead. The financing window closed. My partners have walked. I've been trying to reach that holding company for 8 months, and I can't get a response from anyone in the corporate structure." She looked at the maple tree. "I know. It's your company. It's my family's company." Yes. The silence after that was the longest one she had ever waited out on a phone call. She let it stretch. She wanted him to sit inside it and understand, without her having to explain it. What 11 years of being manageable and overlooked and quietly, completely underestimated felt like from the inside. "I'm not going to sell it to your group, Dominic. I'm also not going to hold it off the market indefinitely. It will go to fair market bid in the fall. If your group restructures and qualifies, you're welcome to submit. You'll receive no preferential terms and no communication outside the standard process." "Serena, please, I want to tell you something." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The November air had nothing on the cool clarity of an April evening when a woman finally chooses her own size. "I kept my family's wealth quiet because I wanted to be loved for who I was. I found out I was not truly known at all. That is the answer to the question you had 11 years to ask and never did." She ended the call. She sat with the Earl Grey going cold in the mug, the case file open in front of her, the maple tree, making its small movements in the April wind. She thought about the airport, not about what she had seen, but about what she had felt in the moment she saw it. Not the break, not the fracture, but the strange clarifying sensation of a question she had been sitting with for years suddenly answering itself. She had been testing the theory that real love could exist without the gravitational pull of money, bending everything toward itself. She had her data. Love without curiosity is not love. It is assumption. It is the comfortable weight of someone who has decided they already know you and has chosen not to update the file. In October, she sat on the screen porch in the early dark with a blanket across her lap, Theo asleep inside. Imani at a friend's house for the night, the neighborhood quiet in the way October evenings in Waterloo get quiet before the first frost. She opened her phone. She navigated to a folder she had made the night she stood at the Pearson mezzanine railing. Not photographs, evidence. The hotel confirmation, the credit card statements, the gate manifest, the itemized dinners, the spa booking, the full, meticulous record of a deception documented by a woman who had grown up in a family where every transaction was recorded and every decision was backed by paper. The divorce was final. Custody was settled. The property division was complete. The Kitchener project parcel was under contract to a qualified buyer who had submitted through the standard process and had no prior relationship with anyone in the Okafor corporate structure. The foundation was funded through the next 2 fiscal years. The children were adapting with the resilience of children who have been given consistent routines and honest conversations. Imani had recently begun asking questions about the foundation's housing work, with an interest that made Serena's mother phone her on a Sunday afternoon to say, in a voice close to tears, she is Gordon's granddaughter, through and through. Serena selected the folder. She confirmed the deletion. The screen returned to her camera roll. Imani and Theo at the Thanksgiving table in the new house, laughing at something off-camera. Theo's Lego city, photographed at his insistence because he had spent 3 weekends on the central train station. The screened porch at the end of summer, a cup of coffee on the table, the yard in full green, her own face, taken by her mother at the foundation's fall gala, wearing an emerald dress she had bought herself without apology. Her expression carrying none of the managed quietness of a woman who has spent a decade making herself smaller in rooms where she was the largest presence. Her father's name on the donor wall, Gordon Okafor, in letters that caught the light every morning when the east-facing lobby windows let the sun in. She closed her phone. She thought about the airport one more time, the glass corridor, the railing, the gray coat moving through the departures level below her. She thought about the 4 minutes she had stood there and not broken. She thought about the call she had made, and the 11 years she had been patient enough to build something strong enough to walk away from everything else. She had wanted to know if love without the weight of money was possible. She had found out that love without attention is not love at all. It is tenancy. And she had been a very good landlord for a very long time. She was home now, in a house she had chosen for herself, on a porch she had specifically wanted, in a city where her family's name was on a building that housed women who had been made to feel invisible by people who needed them to stay that way. She pulled the blanket up. The maple tree was bare now, its branches holding the particular stillness of something that has shed what it no longer needs and is waiting, without urgency, for what comes next. Some women leave with noise. Some women leave with tears. Serena Okafor-Webb left with a folder, a phone call, and the quiet, permanent understanding that she had never needed anyone's permission to take up her full space in the world. She had only needed to stop apologizing for it. The screened porch was cold and clear. She stayed there a little while longer. There was no reason to rush. She was exactly where she had chosen to be.